Hey everyone, so we are now in our packets and we're on page 19. And now that we've seen that video, the one about, we've looked at how to get from one form to another form. So just bringing this map up again, which is on page 17, which will be nice to refer back to as we're going through this next section. We're going to start to graph. And so this is the final part to this chapter. And then this will be what our showcase of learning is going to be on. So what's going to happen in order to graph is we're actually going to need all three forms so we can get all those important points in order to graph. So you're going to have to look at what form you start with, and then that's going to determine what other forms you get next. So on page 19, right now, this problem, we're in standard form. So if you remember, standard form is where we can find the y-intercept. All y-intercepts have an x as 0. And it's going to be the 7 at the end. And the reason, just one more time why this works, is if you put 0 in for this term and this term, when you take 0 and square it, you get 0. And when you take 8 times 0, you get 0. So by putting 0 into the first two terms, it will automatically turn those terms into 0. And then you can add the constant at the end. And that's why if x is 0 and you do all the math, you're going to get y to equal 7. So the trick is, it's just the 7 at the end. So as we get our points, I'm going to graph them as we go. So here's my y-intercept, 0, 7. Okay. And now I'm going to look at my map and see what I can do next, because I'm still going to need factored form and vertex form. So when I look at standard form, I can factor to get to factored form, or I can do this latest thing that we learned about, completing the square to get to vertex form. So that's where I'm going to start, because that's what we've done most recently. And that's where you saw those algebra tiles, and I'm going to group those x's together. So with x squared minus 8x, I'm going to separate them out by putting them in parentheses. And this is where I'm going to add the box. And then the non-x term, that 7, is going to come outside of the parentheses, but then I'm going to have to subtract my box. And so it's a square, and this is my trick for remembering completing the square. So now I need to get the numbers that go in that box or in that square, and we're going to take -8. It's really important that you see it as -8. We're going to always cut it in half, and then we're going to take that number and we're going to square it, and that becomes 16. And I put 16 in the first box. And then I just double check, is it really worth 16? And it is, because there's nothing in front. So if there was something, we can put a 1 here, and 1 times 16 is still 16. All right, so now we're going to get it into that vertex form. So when we're done, it's going to look like this. So starting with my parentheses squared, if I want to put a number there, I'd put a 1, because that's what would be sitting here. But we're going to leave that 1 invisible now, and we're going to do x plus. And then the number in front of this squared is the number that's in front of this squared. And then I'll get the number at the end by having 7 and taking away 16, which is going to give me -9. So now I can get my vertex, which the trick is you look in the parentheses and you take the opposite of that. So there's a -4, so I'll use 4. And then the number behind it, but we won't do the opposite. So there's my vertex, 4, -9. And if you've forgotten how to graph these points, the first number tells you to go left or right, and the second number tells you to go up or down. So from the center, I'm going to go right 4 and down 9. So right 4, down 9, and I end up right here. So the last thing I need to do is get factored form so I can find the x-intercepts. And I'm going to do that using my standard form, and I'm going to factor it. So the first thing I would look at, is there a GCF, which there's not. In this section, it's really important that you do the check of a GCF, because it will make things easier later. But there's not, so with 3 terms, we're going to make our x, and I want to know, are there factors of 7 that get me to -8? And the only factors of 7 are going to be 1 and 7. And I will have to make them both negative to get that -8. I know there's going to be negatives on the side because there's negatives on the top and bottom. So we can go to our parentheses, fill in those x's. And now what we're going to start to do is remember that I can have a 1 here, but those 1s would be invisible. So I'm going to let them stay invisible. If you really want to put them in there. I'm going to put them in there very lightly. I don't have a pencil, so I'm just trying to write really lightly, because the 1x and the 1x would make the 1x squared there, but we're thinking that's invisible. So now I'm going to make my face, top of the head and the smile, to make the side numbers. And can I take 1x times something to get to negative 1x? And that would be a negative 1 following the loop. And can I take 1x times something to get that negative 7x? And that would be a negative 7. And so now, ignoring the 1's, so let me rewrite them. I don't have a pencil to erase. The x-intercepts, the trick is we're going to take the opposite of what we see in here. So if I take the opposite of this, I see a negative 7, so one x-intercept will be the opposite of that, of 7, and this one will be 1. And so one x-intercept is going to be 7, 0, and the other one is 1, 0. Now I'm going to graph my x-intercepts. So my x-intercepts are where they hit the x-axis. So here's 1, 0, and here's 7, 0. And now we're going to graph it. And at this point, I want to bring your attention back to page 25 in your note packet. We had talked about this earlier, that this shape is called a parabola. We had discussed the three forms again. We talked about our x-intercepts. We had talked about the y-intercept. And we had talked about the vertex. But now I want to remind you that there's a line of symmetry that divides your parabola in half. And it will always cut right through the vertex. And we're going to want to put that line of symmetry in because it's going to help us draw a really nice and balanced U. So as soon as you know that vertex, which was here, I would suggest you draw that invisible line of symmetry. It's invisible, but we're going to put it in there because now I can get my nice balanced parabola. Because symmetrical means you have something on one side and you have something on the other side, and they're mirror images of each other. So these points are mirror images of each other. I call them partner points because from the line of symmetry, this is 3 left, so it has one that's 3 right. So this y-intercept can have a partner point, and if this one is 4 left of the line, then I'll have one that's 4 right of the line. So I can get this extra free point, and now I can connect my points, and I'm going to make a U. So make sure it's curved at the bottom, not a V. That's not a very good U, but that's still okay. And now we graphed our first official parabola. So let's take a look at page 20 now, and let's see what we start with. So on page 20, if you notice in the bottom, we start with factored form. So right away, I'm going to go ahead and get those x-intercepts. The trick is take the shortcut, or the shortcut is take the opposite. So I want 6 and 2. And those are going to be my x-intercepts, 6, 0, and 2, 0. All x-intercepts have y as 0. So I'm going to go to the x-axis because it's the x-intercepts, and there's 2, 0, and there's 6, 0. So now I'm going to look at what I have to do next to get the other points. So going back to my map, if I start in factored form, the only thing I can get to now is standard form. There's no loop that takes me here, and I'll do that by distributing. So what my students know is the neighbors meets the neighbors. So if I do that here, and I'll just put my work right above it, when these meet, or x times x is x squared, these will meet, or I'll distribute, and I get a negative 2x. And then these will meet, and I get a negative 6x. And then those will distribute and multiply. And remember, you multiply here, don't add, and you get a positive 12. And when we're done, we get x squared minus 8x plus 12. And so now in standard form, I can see the y-intercept. It's going to be 0, 12. So let's write that up here. And I'm going to go to my graph, and I'm going to put 0, 12 right there. Y-intercept goes right on the y-axis. And so the last thing I'm going to do now is get my vertex form, which can only be done with standard form. So we're going to do that process of completing the square. So I'm going to take those x's that are here, and I'm going to group them and add a square. And then my non-x will be separated outside of the parentheses, and I'll subtract my square. And I'm going to take negative 8. I'm going to cut it in half for negative 4, and then I'm going to square it, and I'm going to get 16. And I'm going to put 16 in this box, and then just double check that it's really worth 16. So There is nothing here. If there were, it would be a 1, and 1 times 16, well, that's still 16. So now for my vertex form, parentheses squared with x plus, I can put that invisible 1 there because there's an invisible 1 there, but I'm not going to put it there. And then in front of the squared, I'll put the negative 4. And then over here, I'll do 12 take away 16 to get a negative 4. And so now I can get my vertex opposite of this number, so I want a 4, but I'll leave this one alone, so I'll take negative 4. And as soon as I graph my vertex, I'm going to put that invisible line of symmetry. I know it says axis, but that's the same thing. So I'm going to go right 4, down 4. So here's right 4, down 4, and hopefully you can see that U, but let's put in that invisible line of symmetry and partner points. And so this will have a partner point of 4 left, so it'll have 4 right. And then I can make my U shape. So the only point that doesn't have a partner point is the vertex because it's on the line of symmetry, so it doesn't have anything matching it on the other side because it's actually on the line. And one thing I didn't talk about on the last one is for the axis of symmetry, because it is a line, we're going to write an equation, and it's going to be called x equals 4. Because on this line, every x coordinate, or every point, has an x value of 4. So this one is 4, 1, 4, 2, 4, 3, 4, 4, 4, 5. Here's 4, negative 4, 4, negative 5, 4, negative 6. So since 4 is showing up so much, that becomes the axis of symmetry. And a little trick is it's just going to be the x-coordinate of your vertex. All right, we have one more to do, and then I'll give you what I need for you to do after this. So on our last page, page 21, what you're going to do is problem 21, or on page 21, sorry, and here we start out in vertex form. So let's go ahead and get our vertex. It's going to be 1, negative 18. And when I try to graph 1, negative 18, so right 1, down 18, it's not going to fit on the graph. So I'll just estimate if this is negative 15, I'll just think that 1, negative 18 might be about here. So, well, that's okay. We can take a guess. So now if we have vertex form and we need to get the other forms, what we'll have to do to get standard form is follow the order of operations. So that's the last thing that we've talked about. This is our most recent thing. So remember, what we're going to do here, I'm going to put it in standard form, just rewrite it up here, is that instead of x minus 1 squared, we're going to get rid of the squared and write x minus 1 out twice. And then from there, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my little post-it notes again. So give me a moment. And when you see 2 sets of parentheses, that's what you should be drawn towards. So I'm going to cover up that, and I'm going to cover this up, and I'm going to distribute or have the neighbors meet the neighbors. So here goes our first round. We're going to get an x squared and a minus 1x. And then we're going to get another minus 1x. And then when these distribute or meet, a negative 1 and a negative 1 is a positive 1. So we're going to get x squared minus 2x plus 1. So there is still more multiplying to do. Order of operations, we should deal with our parentheses first, which we're doing. We're multiplying. And after parentheses are exponents, but we got rid of the exponents. And after exponents is multiplying and dividing. And this 2 is multiplying to this stuff. So I'm going to bring that 2 down. And now 2 is going to meet everything, distribute. So we get 2x squared minus 4x plus 2. And then I'll uncover that last sticky note, and now I'm going to bring down that negative 18 and then combine these like terms. So I'll still have 2x squared minus 4x, but 2 take away 18 will give me a negative 16. And now I have the y-intercept of 0, negative 16. And that also doesn't fit on the graph, but I'm just going to put it at the tip of that arrow and estimate 0, negative 16. So the last thing I'm going to need is factored form. And the only way to get to factored form is starting with standard form. So I'm going to take my standard form equation here. And the first step of factoring is a GCF, and it's really important that you do the GCF. So I'm going to take that 2 out, which leaves me with the x squared. And when I take and divide out the 2 here, I get negative 2x and then negative 8. So the 2 is not going to have anything to do with what I'm about to do now. With 3 terms, I'm going to make my x. I need factors of negative 8 that get me to negative 2. And that will be a 4 and a 2, and notice I am putting the x's with the 4 being negative. And now I'll make my parentheses with their x's, and realize that x and x give me that x squared, so I just need the face to help me get the side numbers. And since these are both x, I'll just start with this one to get negative 4x. So x times what makes negative 4x would be a negative 4. And then x times what makes a positive 2x would be a positive 2. And then I can bring that 2 down, but the 2 won't help me with my x-intercepts. And the trick is the opposite. So this one's negative 2 with 0, and this one's 4 with 0. And then I'm going to go to my graph paper and go to where x is negative 2 and x is 4. So here and here. And hopefully you can start to see that U. I'm going to go to my vertex, which I should have done first, and put in that line of symmetry. I really think it helps you see the U. And then we've got a set of partner points here. So I'm going to give this one its partner point by just moving 1 over. And then you can see that U. It's pretty skinny, but I'm going to make a U, not a V, or I'm going to try to. And now we have our final parabola. So let's talk about what you're going to do now. So what I'm going to ask you to do is on pages 22 and 23, you're going to be doing problems 1, 2, and 3. So there's one problem I do need to change, and it will be number 1. Okay, so hold on one second. So what we're going to do is change this one into x squared minus 4x minus 5. Okay? And so again, you're going to have your problem. This is standard form, so you'll need your you'll get your y-intercept. This is vertex form, so you'll get your vertex right away. And on the final page, you'll start in factored form, so you'll get your x-intercepts right away. So work through these, and then when you're done, you'll check back and see how your answers were when you can look at the answer key.